Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joining me today for our special little holiday edition, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, what's going on, my friend?
Just living life, man. Living life.
I hear you loud and clear, brother. You got any big plans for the 4th of July? Heading into kind of a semi-weekend here. I happen to have a floating holiday Friday, so it just coasts right through into Saturday and Sunday here.
Yeah, I know my brother's making some food and told me to come over, and I said, what can I bring? And he said, you can't bring anything because you gave my wife a laptop.
Wait, what? Before I will mention my 4th of July stuff. I feel like that's a whole other story. Maybe we don't want to get too off the rails with this. We know it's been June and into July. Football in shorts is right around the corner, but man, it has been slow. It's like pulling teeth. We're finally getting through some of these position group things. But you gave her a laptop? I'm assuming that
he called me. He's like, my wife's laptop blew up. Can you help me? And I said, what do you want? He's like, well, I just want a laptop. I said, well, what does she want to do with it? He goes, I don't know, just a laptop. So I gave him a MSI gaming laptop.
Oh, does she play like Sims or something, or no?
She probably doesn't do anything with it that it warrants her having that laptop. But I had 3 of them, and I didn't need one, so I gave one to her.
Oh, well, thanks, brother. I mean, I'm over here sometimes. I'm rolling in the slums with my stuff. You know what I mean? No, it's fun. I don't want to get into too much of that, but you could squeeze a lot out of some old tech. In fact, I found one of these little gaming machines off of AliExpress, and it's like a 1.5 gigahertz processor and maybe a gig of DDR3 RAM. It was only like $20, but it plays everything up to when you get into Nintendo 64 and PlayStation, it starts to chug a little bit, but it flies. It's fast. I'm happy with it. It's portable, and it was kind of cool. But anyways, yeah, I'm planning on having some family over myself, maybe some hot dogs, some the turkey burgers. I don't know. I was between the beef and the turkey. The turkey burgers are pretty delicious. I've been getting these ones at Costco that are really good, and then I have 2 racks of ribs that I need to get moving on here. Get some dry rub. I'm thinking I'm going to use 2 different dry rubs on them. For whatever reason during the holidays,
she said.
Yeah, love to rub the meat.
That's what she said.
Got to put the gloves on when I rub my meat too, by the way. So, with way off the rails. But people bought me so much dry rubs because I was looking for barbecue stuff around Christmas time. What can you get me? Get me dry rub. I have more than I know what to do with right now. So I think I'm gonna try this cherry cola dry rub on the ribs.
Said barbecue. So now I have to tell the barbecue stories that have been going on.
Okay.
So I went up, and I know. Look, there's nothing going on. We'll get to the O-line in a minute. Okay.
You don't want to hear about the offensive line, but we are going to talk about quarterbacks, though. Probably not even as long as we're talking about barbecues. Yeah, go right ahead.
All right. So we went up to New York to see Fogarty and George Thorogood at Bethel Woods, which is Woodstock, right? And we went, and there was supposedly a barbecue festival going on. And my wife said, "Oh, let's go get some barbecue. Let's go taste barbecue." So we get over there, and the barbecue festival is like 6 people who you normally would be at some farmer's market, not selling barbecue, but selling baked goods and or jewelry and or soap. And then you go up to the tent and you're like, okay, what do you got for barbecue? They went, well, we have chicken. I said, what kind of sauce is on it? None. That's not barbecue. That's grilling.
That is, yes. So you make a good point. I'm probably more or less going to lightly smoke over indirect heat. I got one of those. If you remember, we had the Acorn Kamado thing that we gave away years ago, and I happened to get one of those. And
I remember that.
Yeah, they had a pretty good deal on one. I got a scratch and dent one. So, yeah, I'm going to indirect heat over some wood charcoal for that, and then I might finish them off in the oven after I get a little bit of smoke on. Because if you throw those things, I don't want to say you can't you don't want to grill ribs. You throw them right on the grate, you're going to screw them up. You know what I mean? I don't profess to be a barbecue master by any means, but I know that much, you know?
Yeah. So let me continue. Continue this story, because it wasn't done yet.
But you were in New York. Were you expecting good barbecue in New York? That's like expecting good football in Cleveland.
If you expect...
I had to bring it up. The Cam Hayward shirt.
Yes. Expected a barbecue festival to have some barbecue. There was none. So anyway, we come back. My wife's jonesing for some barbecue. I'm kind of jonesing for some barbecue. We find this other place. It's this out in Mullica Hill in New Jersey. They had the Wine and Barbecue Festival, 2-day festival. All right. That sounds something. That sounds promising, right? Oh, okay.
Wine and barbecue. You can't screw both of those up.
Well, I don't do wine, so I don't care.
Yeah, but I don't either. But you know.
So you can buy tickets in advance and you get a tasting ticket, right? And I'm like, all right, well that's also encouraging. You're gonna taste some barbecue, and we get out there, and they've canceled it because of the heat. And so I asked the lady, though, I'm like, well, you would have had barbecue, right? It would have been a bunch of booze with barbecue you could taste. Oh, no, the tasting is just the wine. We'd have had some food trucks come in. You maybe would have had a couple barbecue things in food trucks. I'm like, that's not a barbecue festival.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of, like, in my new digs out in Centerville, Ohio, they have this thing called the Americana Festival that goes on.
Wait. Did you move?
Well, I've been in Centerville area the whole time.
New
now,
dig.
5 years ago.
New digs then.
Well, it's somewhat new digs. Don't forget, I lost a year or two to COVID where these activities weren't going on. But my daughter's in the 4th of July parade tomorrow, and it's like this huge thing. There's going to be like 75, 80,000 people that go down this main street. You want to talk about food trucks, there's got to be like 50, 60 of them easily. So there will be barbecue, my friend. And barbecue starts to get okay. I know it's like Ohio, but it's like southern Ohio, so you get a little bit of that southern flavor. It's still not like being in the Carolinas or Texas barbecue or Kansas City or St. Louis or anything like that. But it'll do, donkey. It'll do, so.
When I moved from Ohio to New Jersey, They said, well, you don't have a southern accent. I said, I'm from Ohio. It's further north than here.
In many cases it is. Many cases it is, but I sent you that DM from the captain, and we'll respond to that if he's listening. We got your message. Yes. Brian saw your message. We'll be responding to that. But
absolutely,
he's out at Wright Pat Air Base, and I'm just like, it's just a small world, man. It really is. But anyways, we don't like grilling, barbecuing, roasting. We don't have anything to really roast here. I just, we have to talk about offensive line as part of these groups that we're going through before we get to training camp. And we wanted to talk about quarterbacks too, but there isn't, me and Brian are just like, there's not a whole lot to talk about with the quarterback position. I know there's people that are going to want to force an issue here. They're going to want to talk about, well, no, don't talk about anything. Russell Wilson getting an extension. Justin Fields getting an extension. Until it happens, I'm not going to hold my breath. The Steelers are not going to put their eggs all in this basket until they see somebody perform. And some people are already counting on Wilson not doing well. Some people are already counting on him being comeback player of the year, which would be awesome, provided you could then re-sign him. Because Steelers have still said they're going to hold their tradition of not doing contract talks within season. So unless these guys get extended during training camp, which those flames are going to be going, we're going to hear about every complete or incomplete pass as they're playing 7-on-7 or whatever, 7 shots, whatever drills that they end up doing, right? And it's not going to matter because we got this is the thing we're going to come back to, I think, this entire period of time through September, Brian. You made the point on the last show. We got deceived last preseason, and it was showed up in the comments, and everybody's like, yeah, we got deceived too. And it's like, okay, so I don't want to like jump the gun and be super excited about, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and I don't know that Fields is going to overtake Wilson. Wilson is the guy right now. That's the reason he was brought in. He's a former Super Bowl champion. He's a multiple-time, 9-time Pro Bowler or whatever it may be. He has the experience. He's 35 years old. He looks like he's got a fire lit under his ass. He's been training with boxers and he's been doing a hell of a lot of community work in Pittsburgh from the jump, right?
What does that look like, by the way? Having fire lit under your ass.
Fire lit under his ass. I don't know.
That sounds painful.
It should get you moving. It's meant to get you up out of the seat instead of just lounging
fits with
around.
Barbecue, maybe. Spicy barbecue light a fire under your ass.
Spicy barbecue might light a fire under your ass. For real. So Speaking of, like, we haven't talked about people under the hot seat, but now Tomlin got an extension, so you got to think like there's not a whole lot of hot seat. The hot seat people really Russell Wilson, Justin Fields right now, right? And maybe
They're on the hot seat.
Guys that are under that are not going to be under contract for next year, maybe, or looking over their shoulder at a rookie, maybe taking their job. But there really isn't that in this situation, because when you look at the offensive line, you got a bunch of new additions to this group that should help said quarterback. So the reason we're really not talking quarterbacks is these three guys, including Kyle Allen, who has, I don't know, 20 starts or something in the NFL. He'll be the emergency guy. There's not a whole lot to talk about with them. We could, pontificate, I think that's one of your words, on whether Wilson will be like a comeback player of the year, whether he's going to put up this many yards, et cetera, et cetera. The fact is with Wilson, 5th offensive coordinator in as many years for him. That's very difficult. But that could be a good thing with the Steelers with new offensive line, some new personnel, maybe a change in scenery. A lot of people just believe you put on that Steelers jersey, you're immediately going to be good. The real truth of the matter is it was very difficult to be good with the way this offensive line has performed the last few seasons. Plus, you got quarterbacks that already were playing below the line with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky. Rudolph came in there and was able to produce some stuff, but that pressure, man, we saw it in the playoff game. Dan Moore just whiffing. That Mason Cole just snapping balls into the ground. For two guys that they picked up who get sacked a tremendous amount of times, Russell Wilson's top 10 in the history of the NFL. There are guys that have tons of more seasons in than what he already has at age 35, right, that are on this list. Like, I want to say, like Tom Brady, for example, who played forever. Obviously, Ben Roethlisberger. But Wilson's already creeping up there. He's like 5th or 6th on this list. And Justin Fields has taken a lot over not seeing the field over his 4 or 3 years in Chicago. You've got to protect this guy. So the question now shifts to, for these quarterbacks to have a chance at success, have the Steelers done enough with the offensive line this offseason?
Well, I mean, we're not going to know the answer to that question until we get through training camp.
We're trying to predict some things here.
Look, they transitioned center. They have 2 number 1 draft picks in tackle positions. They've got 2 very good guards right now. Have they done enough? If that unit gels well together, if Zach Frazier is the guy that we hope that he is, and continues the tradition of great Steeler centers, right? And is worthy of the pick that was with him. If Fontenot and Broderick Jones, if Fontenot can pick up right tackle and Broderick Jones moves to left, right, and you have Dan Moore as a swing or as a backup, if all those things occur, this offensive line looks solid. Like, and not just solid, because all 5 of these guys, all 6 of these guys, potentially all 7 of these guys, if you throw McCormick in there, they're mean. They're nasty guys, right? They have a mean streak. They like to run block. The passing thing, that I'm holding judgment on, right? It's because it is hard to pass block for a long period of time, regardless.
Yes.
Both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson are like Ben was, minus the fact that even though they're elusive, they're just not that hard to bring down. Ben would bounce guys off of him, right? His elusiveness was coupled with the ability that people just couldn't tackle him. And so he held the ball forever, but he could kind of get away with it. I don't know that these guys are going to get away with it. I put that on Arthur Smith to address that by making sure that, it's more of a quick strike kind of thing. We'll see. I am cautiously optimistic that the answer to our question is yes. So thank you very much. Have a great holiday.
No, we got more to talk about than that, obviously. So since it's going to go back like 4 or 5 seasons. I mean, Russell Wilson has taken 48, 47, 33. That was the first year that he actually missed some time. This was a guy that never missed any games, despite taking 527 total sacks in 188 games, not even 200 games. He's the only guy on that list that's over 500 sacks in fewer than 200 games. But over the last 5 seasons, he has taken 228 of those. So they started to come down a little bit. A little bit of that was him not playing full seasons over the last 3. Of course, Denver yanked him because they didn't want to pay him any incentives and have him meet certain performance things. But I looked at the Broncos and I'm kind of like, well, their line should have been decent, but was it really? I don't know. They had the personnel that was there, and of course we had at one point, I believe Mike Munchak was already gone from Denver by this point before they started with Nathaniel Hackett and everything. I'm looking right now just to confirm. Yeah, he was gone after the 2021 season. So you can't even say this is like a Mike Munchak offensive line that was there. They have some guys with pedigree that maybe didn't live up to the billing there. We know that Russell Wilson was very vocal to the point of wanting Pete Carroll and the GM. I can't remember his name right now. It's on the tip of my tongue. John Schneider, maybe that might be the name, out in Seattle. Like, there were rumors that he was calling for their heads because he was just unhappy. He was unhappy. He wanted more money. He wanted protection, et cetera, and it just didn't work out. Now, for Russell Wilson, he's a guy that goes down pretty easy, right? Russell Wilson is what is he? 5'11", 215? A little different than Ben Roethlisberger, who's standing probably about 6'5", 640. What's your first sarcasm? Just a little. Wait, no, they're exactly the same. Well, the thing is, though, the thing where I would equate Big Ben with Little Russ is that they extend plays. So even if Wilson,
don't start that nickname.
I won't
start Little Russ. He'll be mad at us.
He would be. And he's like Drew Brees. He's really beat the odds as far as that stigma of smaller quarterbacks in the NFL being successful. So you had me. I was trying to look for. I think he protects the ball a little bit better than you would think, even for taking all of these sacks. He did lose 10. He had 10 fumbles last year, but I don't know how many were lost. Previously, 8-7, 6-6. Just to give you kind of like a perspective on that. With Ben Roethlisberger, who we seemingly think is like immortal and could do no wrong, right? Ben Roethlisberger lost 11 fumbles in his final season in the NFL. He lost 5 the year before that. The one season he was hurt, so that doesn't really work. But 8, 3, and 7, he's on the same kind of pace. They're going to get hit. Things are going to happen. You're going to play in inclement weather, et cetera, et cetera. So the big thing is that when you look at like somebody like Ben Roethlisberger, you want to look at like game-winning drives. He had 7 game-winning drives in that Matt Canada offense in 2021, which is just mind-blowing. But that was by far the most in his career. Typically, you'd have 4, 3, 4, 2, 1. Fourth quarter comebacks are in the same kind of league, right? Russell Wilson, over the last 5 seasons, has had game-winning drives, 5 game-winning drives, 3, 1, 3, and 4. So he's had 7 game-winning drives, even with that lowly Denver Broncos offense. The same with number there, same figure carries over with fourth quarter comebacks in almost if you just take a number or two off of what I just said, because it's hard to visualize. You got to start doing some things and stuff, Brian, like Matt's with Joe here, if you're going to put all these together. But it's pretty close with the fourth quarter comebacks. It's one of the reasons why you want them there. Now, you hit the nail on the head already with the centerpiece of this offense is a rookie, the last one to actually sign a contract here with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Zach Frazier. Out of West Virginia. It's somebody that we had earmarked as a fit for the Steelers. Is it possible to be worse than Mason Cole? I guess we should start that right out the gate. Is it possible to be worse than Kendrick Green?
Answer is absolutely. Well, okay. Mason Cole, it absolutely is possible to be worse than.
Okay.
Kendrick Green, that's a rough one. I don't know that you can. I don't know that you can legitimately be in the NFL as a center and be worse than Kendrick Green was during his time.
Well, I mean, that's where the expectation is. I mean, who else would play center right now and start week 1? There's nobody else on this roster, right?
Herbig. That's it.
No,
Perfect.
and I don't think he will.
Neither do I.
Does he have any starting experience as a center in the National Football League? None that I recollect. Maybe some preseason time.
I'm clarifying. I don't think that's what will happen.
Yes.
But if Zach Frazier is not the guy that we think that he is, right? If he doesn't impress and that's where they're at, then that's your guy.
Now, we did the roster predictions on the last show, and we had like 8 or 9 offensive linemen making this team. And
Yes, we did.
Among those names, let's see if I could pull this up real quick. We had 9. Hopefully I have this correct again, because I had some things like mistyped or whatever, but these are my private notes, okay? I'll do what I'll do. Zach Frazier, and we mentioned the 2 veterans, the free agents that were added over the previous seasons, James Daniels and Isaac Seumalo. Broderick Jones, Dan Moore, 2 tackles, Troy Fautanu is in here as well. But then Nate Herbig, Spencer Anderson, Mason McCormick, the other rookie that was drafted 4th round, if my thinking is correct, South Dakota State. That's 9 dudes, but I don't see anybody aside from, Spencer Anderson, maybe Mason McCormick. McCormick had some experience playing center as well. So they got some guys that are position flexible, especially Anderson. He plays all of them, right?
Yeah.
But if Zach Frazier were, knock on wood here, to get hurt or be bad, I think they got to stick with him regardless if he's bad. I just don't know where the depth is. The depth is here. And then I think this whole thing could go to shit regardless if he's not good or if he gets hurt. I'm trying not to get those preseason. Again, we were fooled by the preseason, remember? So
yes.
I will
never forget.
I don't want the hyperbole with the center position is probably the one that worries me the most. But then again,
is that how you say that word? Hyperbole?
Hyperbole.
I thought it was hyperbole.
I say hyperbole. I believe you could say it like syrup and syrup. So if not, that's blame my Yinzer mom for, that's another thing that would come from
hyperbole.
Her.
Okay.
Oh my
I'm going to go get me some hyperboles.
My grandmother was, like I mentioned this before, my grandmother the one word that never came across, my buddy's mom used to say "worsh" all the time. But my mom would say "measure." My grandmother, whatchamacallit, thingamajigger, all these other things. Yins.
To continue that distraction.
Yeah.
What do you color with in a coloring book?
Crayons.
My wife says crowns.
Crowns. I've heard cranes, like crayons.
Crowns.
Like you completely miss it, but you
She's
tend to
I want some crowns, please. I want to color. I'm like, crowns are go on a king's head. What?
No.
Where's the O in the beginning of that word? Where's the W?
No, you forget, my friend. I became an English major because of all the screwed up stuff that my family says, and I still I'd like to know. Drop in the comments, especially if you're some folks that are in the Rust Belt area, Pittsburgh, Ohio, West Virginia kind of stuff. Do you folks say refrigerator by any chance? I think people say fridge or refrigerator, but refrigerator. And is it a buggy or a cart? You go to the grocery store, shopping cart, or is it a buggy? You got some of those things. Anyways, back on to Zach Frazier. Well, there's got to be some Zach Frazier fans out there. There's got to be some West Virginia folks that are paying attention. They would know. They would join in on this conversation. You know where I'm not worried, Brian, is on both sides of Zach Frazier. This should help. There should be some stability for him. You've got Seumalo, who did not give up a sack last year, and James Daniels, who only gave up 1, despite the erratic play around them. Chuks Okorafor on the one side, Mason Cole in the middle, Dan Moore on the other side. I have high hopes for these guys, and I don't necessarily think, depending on what else might happen, if there's some big mystery move, big contract extensions, I don't see why they would necessarily jump the gun and not bring James Daniels back. Everyone just assumes because they drafted Mason McCormick now that he is the heir apparent to take over that guard position. I don't think that's necessarily true, because if you got a guy that's playing at this high level and he continues to play at this type of level and doesn't give up any sacks, you sign him for another 2-3 years. You have this core group now together for several years that could help lead the Steelers into the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's been yammering about extensions for almost everybody that wants an extension right now. If they don't do one, they don't do one. At some point, you have to get younger anyway. But as you know, if at the end of this season, James Daniels has been playing great, maybe they try and keep him. And if they don't, they don't. I don't know. I'm at the point where I'm like, thank you for your service, James, and continue to play well. But what's not going to happen is it's not going to be, a top guard contract, right? It's not going to be the pinnacle of guard contracts. He's not going to get market, the top of the market, regardless of whether he deserves it or not, because there's too much money wrapped up in other stuff. So, and then they're going to one way or another find themselves in the position of having to pay a quarterback next year.
Yes.
Whoever it is.
Yes. So that's a very excellent point. And James Daniels, age 26, turns 27 in the middle of September. From my neck of the woods, originally Warren, Ohio, just north of Youngstown. And also Tina's neck of the woods, went to Iowa. He was a center. I got to bring that up because somebody's going to be like, "Well, he played center in college." Yeah, he played center, and then he's never played it in the NFL. So he's not going to be a center in the NFL. I'm sorry, unless it's like emergency situation would dictate that. So he is your right guard. That's where he's going to be. But he's young enough, man. I mean, I don't see I don't see them shoving him out the door. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. This isn't a guy that's like 32 years old or something like that.
No, that's a valid point. Mm-hmm. And it really will just be a function of probably scratch. It'll be a function of dollars. If he is a really high level guard at the end of this season, sure, they'll try and keep him. And if they can't, they can't. And all that being said, I would prefer that James Daniels was still here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Extend him a little longer. Sorry, you caught me in the middle of a coffee break there. And I will say this much. A lot of people are speculating on, well, the Steelers, they freed up some money. They got all this money in their salary cap. They're looking for a big move. They're looking for guys that are going to be cut at the end of training camp that they could add, maybe like they did with Joe Hayden years ago. The Browns got rid of him, veteran player, you could upgrade. They're looking at all these different wide receivers around the league. Maybe they do make a trade, and they got to have a little bit of scratch. They got to have some padding there in order to bring that guy's salary, his contract on board. Or they're allowed to kick over, I believe the figure, I think it's still hovering at like $30 million. So, I mean, there's a salary cap, but there's a salary floor as well in the National Football League. And they're allowed to carry over monies that are unspent from the previous season. And there's going to be guys that, it happens. Part of the game, somebody gets hurt. They might have to sign somebody. So they've got a little bit of money that's still sitting out there. It doesn't mean that they're going to spend all the way up to their budget like I might do. So right now, I got about 16. It's 15.9 according to overthecap.com. It's about $15.9 million in cap space. They have Over the Cap has them reported as 92 players on this roster. They must have somebody that's maybe hurt or something that they're accounting for on a list somewhere. But next year, there's only 40 players that are under contract for 2025. Projected salary cap space of 77.2. I don't believe that includes the carryover. If you go and sign a quarterback and he's going to be somewhere around 40 million, which is this new going rate we're talking about, that's going to wipe out half of that. And we're not even talking about Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth. We just mentioned James Daniels, Cameron Hayward, which the rumors, Brian, I didn't mention this, but just for the people that were listening, maybe not watching, Brian has the rebuttal to Cam Hayward, all this speculation. It's on his t-shirt.
Bro, I ain't going to Cleveland.
That's great. That's great. And, unfortunately, if he ended up going there, he'd end up stinking. That's why he knows. It's like where your career goes to die. So, anyways, continuing on the offensive line.
I know how you feel about the Browns, and I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. But
I don't know about that. There's still guys that go there that don't end up. Let's put it this way. You think Deshaun Watson's career is on the uptrend, on the upswing right now?
Let's be fair. Was it ever going to be?
I mean, and Joe Flacco went back there just to have his career killed again. So, and just, it still happens. They still hang on to some guys. Solomon Wilcots this morning on XM NFL Sirius XM NFL radio. I could never say that full thing. I could never get that out of my mouth. But he was talking about him and James White were the hosts on the morning drive. And they were talking about, they started getting into the Cleveland Browns. They were talking about Watson. They were talking about some other things. And they were talking about the Browns are looking for tight ends. And it might be that Mary Kay Cabot that reports up at one of the beat writers that's up in Cleveland covering the Browns. She's talking about, well, they're going to see how things shake out and add another tight end because Njoku had like the most drops on the team or something with passes, et cetera, et cetera. And it got into Watson and all this other stuff. And there was a comment Wilcox made. And he goes, we talk about how great this roster looks, but it just talks about the parity in the National Football League that you have to perform even when the roster may look that good, So Mr. Squeaky Chair
had to move.
Anyway, let's get to the tackles. And then we'll talk reserves and backups to all of this. So Dan Moore Jr., he's out, right? No longer a starting left tackle after starting there for 3 seasons. I don't see how they can still have him there. Was there a little hesitancy to throw Broderick Jones out into the fire as a left tackle? Absolutely. You look around the league. You look in the division. You look at Trey Hendrickson. You look at Myles Garrett. Hello, defensive player of the year. That still makes me sick to say. You got to be up against these guys. Who knows who the Ravens have out there? But they brought in Kyle Van Noy. They've had Justin Houston. They've had guys that are veterans that know that's their primary function is that one outside linebacker, and their hybrid 3-4 to just go after the quarterback. And they're coming from that side usually, and that's going to be Dan Moore. Now Dan Moore has locked it down. And the Steelers went 5-1, even with a poor offensive line and I don't even want to say mediocre, below average, or near league bottom quarterbacking for most of the year. So in regards to all of this, you've got a lot of new moving pieces, but some of it you don't. You have Daniels, you have Samalo, you do have Broderick Jones drafted as a left tackle. They're putting him on the right. Did I feel that was a mistake? I don't think so necessarily. Now, Fatanu comes in. Where's Fatanu going to fit in and play? Which side is which when it comes to the 2 young tackles? And does one of them maybe not make the cut and they still roll with Moore? What happens to Dan Moore Jr.? Because I'll tell you what, it's hard to just move on from a guy that has experience, and even not like it's not great. He's not going to be back in 2025. They could probably trade him for something, but then the cupboards are really bare behind him, and you don't have any depth if one of the two. I always want to keep calling Jones a rookie, but let's just call him second-year player and a rookie don't perform.
Yeah, I don't see Dan Moore Jr. going anywhere this year, right? For that very reason. What's behind him? You've got Spencer Anderson who can play tackle. Maybe McCormick can play tackle if push comes to shove, but you need him. You need him for depth, right? That being said, if somebody else, some other team loses a left tackle or right tackle, left tackle, he doesn't play right tackle, loses a left tackle, they might be calling the Steelers if Dan Moore's not playing, right? And is certainly viable. My expectation is he won't be. My expectation is Broderick Jones will be playing left tackle and Fatanu will be playing right. That is what my expectation is. Doesn't mean it's what will happen, right? It depends on how Fatanu adjusts to being on the right side. Whether he can make those adjustments, whether they're happy with those adjustments. It will depend on whether Broderick Jones can play left tackle at the level that Dan Moore was playing it or better, right? That would be the hope, considering that what's been invested in both those two guys. But that's the tale of the tape, so to speak, with the Steelers' offensive line this year, right? Are the tackles that they spent draft capital on going to pan out? Is the center going to pan out? Are they going to gel with the 2 veterans at guard and make a cohesive unit? My guess, it might look a little ugly for a couple games.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But if they do, you've got 3 core pieces that will last for a while, right? And maybe James Daniels, maybe Isaac, hang around, and you've got an offensive line that you can count on if it all pans out.
Yeah, and the reason I keep thinking of Jones, like I'm like, oh, first year playing on the left side since Dan
Yes.
Moore started there. I think some of that was very strategic, though. They felt like, okay, Jones is good. We want the veterans. We know the beginning of the schedule is always rough, playing against the 49ers, against, Nick Bosa. And then who else did they have? They had Max Crosby against Myles Garrett and then Max Crosby. Those were like the first
Yeah.
3 weeks. He would have been facing guys like that as a left tackle, completely brand new to the NFL. Well, at the same time, they weren't sold on Chukwuekorfor playing on the right side either. And it was like, okay, which of these two guys is going to be the worst? Then we could put Broderick Jones in here, maybe to shore things up and improve, which ended up happening. Now
Yeah.
you've got to move Jones over to the left where he has all the experience on the right. Fatanu, a lot of people are going to point out, played left in college and now is going to go over to the right side. Now he did have some experience there, but of course, coming out of college, I'm thinking Washington. I keep thinking Oregon because of the other guy. All these guys that had their names like the same, with the last name that began with F. But Fatanu out of Washington, you had Michael Penix Jr., who's a lefty. So everything was flipped. And he's even said this in interviews that, this shouldn't be the biggest adjustment that you think it is, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be something intriguing to watch. I don't know. Would Fatanu, can you put him on the left side, 6'4", 317? I know it's not where maybe they were looking to draft him, but a lot of people have made jokes that they have 3 left tackles and no right tackle currently. You're not going to put Dan Moore on the right, as you mentioned. They won't force that issue. There's just something, he's got like 2 left feet or something. And it's just that has just never been in their plans.
Right. It's not going to work. So it's going to be Fatanu or it's going to be Broderick Jones. One of the two of them is going to play right tackle. And depending on which one of those is playing right tackle might dictate whether Dan Moore Jr. is playing left tackle or not.
So we used to ask this question. We used to compare the Steelers' offensive line once upon a time with the greats of, by the way, have you seen Marquise Pouncey and the amount of weight he's lost? Let me see if I can find
Sure.
Let me see if I can find him, find that photo that's out there. So as I'm doing that, we used to compare these guys, Pouncey, DeCastro, Villanueva, Foster, Gilbert. We used to say they were the best offensive line in the National Football League, or among the best lines in the National Football League. We haven't been able to say that for a while. Within their own division, we've seen the Bengals improve, maybe still a little shaky here or there. Burrow keeps getting hurt. How can you say the same thing with Lamar Jackson now? Jackson has been healthy last year. Cleveland Browns, kind of interesting. You got some guys that are starting to get up there in age. They do have some younger guys that they drafted, but they lose Callahan. He goes with his son over down to Tennessee. They allow him to leave. He's the architect of those blocking schemes and that offensive line being great over the last few years. So, and they also have a new offensive coordinator, even though Kevin Stefanski really runs the show and they fired Van Pelt as kind of being a scapegoat. But you know what I mean? It's still, there's new coaches that are part of that offensive staff. Could this Steelers group climb out of, it's safe to say they've been in the basement for a few years when it comes to comparing them around the division. Can they climb out of it? I think they can, but I think the perception's still going to be when you have 4 teams that still had a winning record last year. They could still be in last, but it's not as much of a distant disparity as it may have seemed in the past.
No, I'm going to be candid. I don't think they were last. I've not been impressed with the Bengals offensive line ever. So I'm still, despite the fact that they have talent to overcome it, when you've got people like, Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, and what they've been able to do. But I don't think I think the Bengals had the worst offensive line in the division. I think they still have the worst offensive line in the division. Do I think the Steelers have the best offensive line in the division? I think that there is now a chance they could have the best offensive line in the division. But I can't say that until I see how they play together and how they gel together. They certainly have invested both draft capital and free agent capital in trying to make that happen. It's a priority, which is good, right? And I'm encouraged in many ways because it does feel like this regime is kind of like, hey, guess what? You didn't work. next one up.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. They're not just going to stick with people. I don't know. Like, you're stuck with what you got. You got the hand that you're dealt in a lot of cases. So, like,
Yeah.
were you going to move on from Mason Cole with whom? You know what I mean?
Right.
But when Chooks wasn't working out, you had another card in the deck that you could play. That happens in a lot of situations where you had all the injuries at inside linebacker. It's like, what are you supposed to do? Michael Walker, he's out there. Miles Jack, you want to come out of retirement? He had to let his papers clear to be reinstated and stuff like that. I dug up the Marquise Pouncey image. Le'Veon Bell had retweeted this. This was posted on Pouncey's Instagram, I believe, but I found it here on the X. Don't forget to follow Brian in his new Twitter account, by the way. But this man used to block 300-pound nose guards alone. He is looking like he's gonna go out there with Faneca and run a 5K or something, man. He's looking
It's
amazing, the transformation.
a lot of these guys have to load the weight on, and when they stop, they stop, and it's they transition back down.
Yeah, it's a hard stop. Good for him, though. It's good to see. I think we can all agree it's a healthier weight than playing it like around 300-ish. You know what I mean? Any human at 300-ish. I mean, even when you're like 6 foot something, that's a lot on the frame, man. It's a lot on the ticker. So I think it does it for us here, Brian. I did mention, yeah. What else we got? It's offensive line. I mean, we could talk about the reserve guys if you really want to, but we kind of already glossed over, Spencer Anderson, Nate Herbig. Who else do we have in Mason McCormick? There's not a lot to say about these guys. They should probably never see the field, knock on wood.
Not yet.
No.
Mason McCormick, I have some hopes for down the road, but not yet. If you've got Spencer Anderson and McCormick and Herbig in the offense, you've got some issues that have happened.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, McCormick I think that was somebody that we had earmarked. It was like we've been getting our wish lists fulfilled with Omar Khan as of late, so it's been pretty nice. I didn't have Roman Wilson anywhere on my trajectory, and I'm hoping that he can ascend to pass blocking and everything, like run blocking, whatever may be the case, be involved in the pass game, of course. I meant to say run blocking primarily because we think of him as a nasty guy. Darnell Washington. So a lot of this is going to hinge. Arthur Smith. It's a whole new regime here, hopefully. New quarterbacks, new offensive coordinator. It's exciting times. Training camp right around the corner at the end of this month. The players report. I got to go dig up that number, but it's somewhere near the end of July here, 20th or something like that. And then we'll be talking some more from what we see. And preseason football is just a little over a month away. August 9th is the first Pittsburgh Steelers preseason game. They got 2 at home. And maybe we get to see some of these guys in actual pads and uniforms since there's only 3 preseason games. If only momentarily, we get to see some of them in action, especially the rookies. So looking forward to that. Thank you once again, Brian. Enjoy your 4th of July, my friend.
Wait.
Thanks for joining us.
Let's talk to the captain.
Yes.
You
can talk to the captain. You could send a private message, but we've got you, Captain.
Don't worry. I got the message. I know that you DM'd me in my old account, but Joe got the message on the hotline. Don't worry. I will take care of you next year or this season.
Yep. And we have, don't forget to follow Brian there at Brian E. Roach SCU. He's only got 74 followers. Folks, come back. I had to go in and I clicked so he's up to 74. He was at 73. I hadn't actually followed your new account. I didn't realize it from my personal. So sorry about that, brother.
It's all good. It's all good.
Enjoy your 4th of July. Make sure you keep all your digits if you're blowing off any explosives or fireworks. And
I will be doing no blowing off.
And I will catch you on the flip side here. We'll have some more Pittsburgh Steelers coverage, maybe some fun things coming up here in the coming weeks. And then, of course, we get into the nitty-gritty with training camp coverage, a few more position groups to cover, and a couple other things that, we're pontificating. Can I say it's pontificating? Is that the right way? So
yes.
I say things.
It's my word. You keep stealing my word.
That's because, you know what? I hadn't had enough coffee today to think of my own. That's why. So on that note, folks, take care. Have a great holiday weekend. Till next time, my name's Joe Kuzma. His name's Brian E. Roach. And we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.